In a world where everyone seems to be in a hurry, chasing goals, staring at phones, rushing past strangers, without a glance, it is rare to witness simple, uncalculated kindness, the sort of gesture that demands nothing in return and expects no reward. Yet it is this exact kind of quiet compassion that can change a life forever. And this is the story of Emma, a struggling waitress in a small city diner, whose spontaneous act of humanity not only touched the heart of a stranger, but unknowingly altered the course of her own future. Because sometimes the smallest actions have the greatest ripple effects. It was a rainy gray morning, the kind that soaks through coats and freezes the hands. And in the corner of the cafe door appeared an old man, dripping wet with trembling hands, reaching into his coat pockets only to realize with quiet horror that he had left his wallet at home. The man stood awkwardly in line, his face lined with age and worry as the young barista loudly mocked him, asking if he could even afford a coffee, while a few other patrons smirked and shook their heads as if an old man's forgotten wallet was a spectacle to laugh at. Emma watched this unfold from the side, and something in her heart stirred because she knew what it was like to be judged, to be looked down upon for things beyond your control. Like the time she could not pay for her textbooks in college and had to leave them behind on the counter, her face burning as the cashier sneered, or when her mother broke down in tears in a grocery store, unable to afford food for the week. An old woman silently placed bills in her hand without a word Emma remembered. And so before the scene could worsen, she stepped forward, smiled gently at the old man and said, "Sir, your coffee is on me today. Please sit and stay warm." And the man looked at her, startled as if no one had shown him grace in years. And she meant it not for attention, not for praise, but because kindness is always right, even when no one notices, but someone did notice. Her manager scowled, muttering about giving away product. Her coworkers sneered, calling her self-righteous, but Emma brushed them off because in that moment she was proud to choose kindness. And this story reflects real incidents around the world, like the tale of Liz Woodward, a waitress in New Jersey who paid for two firefighters' breakfasts only to have them later raise tens of thousands for her father's medical bills, or the stranger who bought lunch for a homeless man in Australia, inspiring a viral movement of pay-it-forward meals. These stories remind us that generosity often finds its way back to the giver, even if they never expect it. Emma didn't expect anything. She returned to cleaning tables, helping customers, ignoring the stares and whispers, because for her the moment of grace was enough. But what she didn't know was that the old man was no ordinary guest. He was Charles H. Everlin, a quiet billionaire who disguised himself to test the world's kindness, who sat now at the corner table sipping coffee and watching Emma with thoughtful eyes. And in the next part, we will see how this single cup of coffee leads to a life-changing revelation, and how Emma's pure heart sets her on a path she could never have imagined, not with wealth, but with purpose. Days passed without event, and Emma thought little more of the quiet old man with the forgotten wallet because life in the small city diner was unchanging, marked by the clatter of plates, the smell of coffee, and the soft buzz of conversations that filled the long hours of her shift. But one afternoon, as she wiped down the counter, the door opened, and in stepped a man she barely recognized, clean-shaven, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, polished shoes, gleaming briefcase in hand. And it was only when he removed his hat and smiled gently that she realized it was the same old man from the rainy morning. But now without the coat, without the tremble, without the weary posture. And he approached her table, laid a crisp business card down and said, "Emma, my name is Charles H. Everlin, and I believe we need to talk." And as he spoke, the cafe fell silent. Her manager stared, her co-workers gawked, but Charles only had eyes for Emma, explaining quietly that he was a billionaire, not a beggar, that he had wandered the city for months dressed in rags, testing the kindness of strangers, tired of business deals and fake smiles, searching for someone genuine who could see him as human and not as a wallet. And that day she had given him more than coffee. She had given him hope. And Emma stood frozen, unsure what to say, wondering if this was a cruel prank, until he smiled and said, "You restored my faith in people, and for that I owe you more than thanks." And this revelation shocked the room, turning sneers to silence and disbelief to awe. But Charles continued inviting Emma to dinner, not in grandeur, but in friendship, wanting to learn about the woman who had changed his view of the world. She hesitated, unsure of such attention, but something in his eyes, sincere, unguarded, made her agree. And their quiet dinner days later revealed more than wealth. It revealed a man lonely, despite riches, longing for real connection, and Emma shared her dreams, her struggles, her desire to make the world kinder, and he listened without judgment, and in the months that followed, he invited her to see the world not in luxury, but in service as he visited shelters, funded schools, helped the unseen, and Emma began to understand that kindness, when given freely, can reach places money cannot. And this mirrors real-life stories like that of Ted Gupp's anonymous benefactor, who gave strangers money during the Great Depression, with a simple note promising that kindness was the only repayment needed. Or the case of Ratan Tata, the Indian billionaire, who visits victims of disasters, personally refusing media attention, because true generosity needs no applause. And Emma saw this in Charles, who despite billions chose simple acts of grace over grand gestures. And as their friendship deepened, he offered to fund any dream she wished, to build a charity, a school, a clinic. But Emma shook her head gently, saying, "I need to do this my way, with my hands, my heart." And Charles smiled, respecting her courage, because rare are those who refuse easy fortune for honest work. And in the next part, we will see how Emma's quiet resolve turns into action, how she transforms a forgotten corner of the city into a place of hope, and how her story reminds us all that kindness is the wealth that endures. Emma's decision to refuse Charles Everland's generous offer of funding was not made out of pride or foolish stubbornness, but out of the deep belief that if her dream was to serve her community, to make a real difference, it had to be built by her own hands, her own heart, her own hard work. Because what she wanted was not a charity project stamped with a billionaire's name, but a living, breathing space where dignity, kindness, and belonging would be the currency. And so with quiet resolve, Emma scraped together savings, took out a modest loan, enlisted the help of friends and former customers who remembered her small kindnesses, and slowly, painfully, transformed the old rundown cafe on the city's corner into something new and beautiful. The First Cup Cafe was its name, a simple, clean space filled with secondhand furniture, repainted tables, and handmade signs that read, "No one pays for their first cup here," because Emma knew from experience how one free coffee could mean the difference between despair and hope, between feeling invisible and feeling seen. And the word spread quickly through the neighborhood, not because of flashy ads, but because of quiet talk. The tired office worker who found a smile and a seat on a bad day, the homeless veteran who was served a warm drink without judgment, the lonely grandmother who found friends and laughter over tea, and these moments, small and countless, wove a new fabric of trust in the city's heart. And this story reflects real-life miracles like the Pay It Forward Cafe in Australia, where patrons can buy coffee in advance for strangers, or the suspended coffee movement born in Italy, where the simple tradition of buying an extra coffee for someone in need has spread across the world, reminding people that generosity need not be grand to be great. Emma's Cafe became this kind of haven, a place where rich and poor, young and old shared space without fear of shame or scorn. And even Charles would visit quietly, sitting in a corner, book in hand, watching the place he had helped inspire, without owning it, respecting Emma's wish to make it wholly hers. And the cafe's walls soon filled with thank you notes, drawings from children, letters from visitors who spoke of finding peace or joy or comfort when they had nowhere else to go. And the local newspaper ran a story calling it the soul of the neighborhood, and volunteers arrived offering music, poetry, free tutoring, cooking classes, because the kindness Emma planted had grown into a garden tended by many hands. And Emma worked harder than ever, tired but joyful, knowing that this was the purpose she had always dreamed of, not wealth or fame, but connection. And as the months turned to years, the First Cup Cafe became a landmark, a symbol of quiet revolution in a noisy world, proving that change begins not with grand gestures, but with small, brave acts repeated with faith and love. And in the next part, we will see how Emma's work touches lives beyond her city, inspires movements elsewhere, and earns her the quiet respect of those who once doubted her. As her story teaches us all that kindness is never wasted, and that the smallest seeds of compassion can grow into forests of hope. The First Cup Cafe became more than a neighborhood spot. It became a symbol of quiet resilience, a living example of how one person's simple belief in kindness could ripple far beyond a single street corner. And soon reporters from other cities arrived filming Emma's story, sharing it on national news, calling it the cafe that gave more than coffee, and letters poured in from strangers across the country. People who wanted to start their own First Cup projects, churches, community centers, even schools inspired to create spaces where need did not mean shame, where everyone, regardless of wealth or status, was treated with dignity and grace. And Emma answered every letter not with grand promises, but with simple advice: serve with heart, listen without judgment, and let kindness lead. Because the lesson of her journey was clear. Generosity is not measured by money, but by presence and intention. And this truth touched people far beyond her imagining, like the small diner owner in Ohio who began offering free breakfast every Monday for the unemployed, or the bookstore in Seattle that created a free reading corner for homeless youth stocked by community donations. And these real changes, rooted in Emma's quiet dream, mirrored historical movements like the Little Free Library Project that began with one man placing a small box of books outside his home and grew into thousands worldwide, or the free store movements of the 1970s reborn in modern cities, where goods are shared freely, not sold, all proving that when one person dares to trust in human goodness, it awakens the same courage in others. And as months turned to years, the First Cup Cafe hosted workshops for young entrepreneurs, cooked community meals on holidays, sheltered neighbors during storms, becoming not just a business, but a lifeline. And Charles H. Everlin visited rarely, now proud to watch from afar, as Emma's independence flourished, and once he returned, sitting quietly at the counter, smiling as Emma poured him coffee and thanked him. Not for money, but for believing in her choice to walk the hard path alone and together. They laughed, remembering the rainy day when a forgotten wallet and a kind waitress changed both their lives. And Charles gently placed an envelope on the counter containing a quiet gift, a scholarship fund in Emma's name for young women who dreamed of building honest businesses, no strings, no conditions, because real giving asked nothing back. And Emma, grateful but firm, added her own savings to the fund, doubling its size, wanting to share her blessing, and their shared act of trust inspired more donors, more stories, and soon the First Cup Scholarship helped launch bakeries, bookstores, repair shops, and coffee houses across the state, each one carrying the spirit of Emma's little cafe, and her city changed too. Crime fell, neighbors knew each other, doors stayed open longer. Laughter returned to once empty streets, and Emma finally allowed herself to rest, to dream of her own future, of a family of peace, knowing her work would live beyond her. And in her quiet apartment at night she smiled, reading new letters from far places, from people who never met her, but felt her kindness in their own towns. And the lesson of this story, clear and bright as dawn, spoke to all who heard it, that greatness is not built on fortune or fame, but on the courage to be kind when no one watches, on the willingness to give when giving costs you something, and that the smallest gifts, like a single cup of coffee offered with love, can change a life, change a heart, change the world. And so if you, the viewer, carry anything from Emma's journey, let it be this: your smallest kindness may be the spark of someone's greatest day. Your quiet compassion may set a stranger on a new path. The world waits for these moments, these chances for hope and dignity to be restored in places where they are most needed, because change is not the work of heroes or kings, but of waitresses and strangers in you.